Hey guys, Garvey here. Today I want to talk about something have thought about a lot recently, and I've always found very interesting, and I don't really see other people mention it. A lot of people tend to sort of divide up films in seemingly arbitrary ways, whether it's through foreign cinema and American cinema, that just the rest of the world is one whole blanket statement, or even dividing it up even in a more ridiculous fashion by genre, which is bizarre because to think The Godfather and The Mirror by Tarkovsky, like those are two completely different pictures and they're both dramas. So I don't think defining a film by its genre is a particularly salient point. I think it's kind of, arbitrary. Because you can have the argument that, they're all just films and that's it, and it's worthless trying to break it up. And I think that's kind of bizarre. So I've been thinking about that a lot recently, about sort of a proper way in giving definition to the different types of films. So to me, there seems to be two types of pictures. You have the dream picture and the poetic picture. And those are differences to the core, to the absolute essence of a movie. Which is also an interesting way to break it up too, because the dream picture, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's sort of that dream mentality. Whether it's, Ozu or Tarkovsky, with the delaying the edits, those long shots, it kind of puts you in a sort of trance. Whereas the poetic cinema, which is the most prevalent nowadays at least, is that there's rhyming. It rhymes and it's digestible and it's a very earthly. You could see it with your eyes and explain the genius of it. Like, the way they did this with that. Like, it's a very digestible kind of a thing. And poetic cinema seems to me to be the prevalent form ever since post-sound. Because when you think about it in your dreams, there really isn't any sound. It's a visually crafted experience, right? So I think the original films without sound relied heavily on the use of the dream image. But then as the film evolved and the technology evolved for them to use sound, they add a lot of literary elements. They made the poetry of the film the center and not the dream aspect. And, obviously all films, they go back and forth. There's no film that is 100% poetic or 100% dream, but there's levels to it. There's something like The Godfather is extremely poetic. It rhymes, right? The way, the son sort of takes, his father's position and sort of rejects that lifestyle. He's sort of forced to accept the lifestyle. And then not only forced, but he learns to love the lifestyle. He finds out that's who he is, that as much as he doesn't want to, he is just like his father. And that's what I sort of mean about this sort of the poetry of it. It's explainable. But with something like The Mirror or Ozu's Tokyo Story, there is no explanation. It just is. And you could try at lengths to be like, it's this and that and the other thing. But really, it's just like you have to watch the movie together. And I think the core of that comes from the fact that poetry cinema is based off literature. They sort of the foundation of the poetic cinema comes from literature. It has that Shakespearean element to it. It's about the woods. So since it's more based off that, it's easier to explain it. Whereas the dream cinema, it harkens back to the visual image, and it's very difficult to compound a visual image into a string of sentences. You really can't do it. It's very much so you have to see it to believe it kind of a thing. So I've thought about this a lot for maybe a couple of years. I've kind of gone back and forth, kind of seeing the merits of this kind of thinking. And I did a lot of reading on it. In a book that I actually picked up a few months ago by Paul Schrader, Transcendental Style in Film. And interestingly enough, Paul Schrader had a similar way of breaking up pictures. To him, it was the transcendental film and the psychological film. And, transcendental was the dream cinema, and then the psychological film was the poetic thing. And it's the same level, because when you think about the psychological aspect of a man is explainable, like the psychologist who can elaborate on the psyche of a human being. Whereas there's this other level of the transcendent mind, which isn't as understandable. And there's actually an excerpt I want to read that I think brilliantly describes the sort of transcendental and dream aspect of the cinema. By delaying edits, not moving the camera, forswearing music cues, not employing coverage and heightening the mundane, transcendental style creates a sense of unease the viewer must resolve. The filmmaker assists the viewer's impulse for resolution by the use of a decisive moment. an unexpected image or act which then results in a stasis, an acceptance of parallel reality transcendence. And really, you could take this, and I'm talking about mainly within the aspect of film, where there's the films we understand, and also the poetic cinema. I think that is the most prevalent because it's tied up. It's a nice tied up round thing, you put it in a box, and that's what it is. Whereas the dream cinema is something you just sort of think about endlessly, really, because there is a certain level of endless interpretations with a dream film, such as The Mirror that I keep referencing. And really all the Tarkovsky films, really, I like that. And even House is a dream film, which is less about the mundane, but it too sort of has the bearings of a transcendental film. But House is actually kind of interesting because I think House marries the two the most evenly. It is the most transcendental and the most poetic at the same time. You can apply philosophy to a multitude of art forms, far past film, such as Friedrich Nietzsche did in the book The Birth of Tragedy, his first book, where he broke it up into the Apolline and the Dionysiac, and in a simpler terms, as dream and intoxicating art. The Apolline being the dream, and the Dionysiac being the intoxicating art. And the intoxicating and poetry art, is a very comparable comparison. And same with the psychological. It's the three match up. The psychological, the poetic, and the intoxicating, because it's about a resolution. That's one of the big differences, I think, between the sort of poetic and dream films. Poetry is about resolution. It's catchy. It's resolute. It's all there. There's subtext, and you can read it in between the lines. But what's there is what you got. Whereas with the dream films are most peculiar, because for me, there's a lot of times where I remember them completely differently. And everyone who's seen it, they have a completely different way of interpreting it, and not only interpreting it, but visually viewing it in their mind, right? Different scenes pop out completely to different people. It's a much harder thing to track down and trace and sort of determine its worth than the poetic film. That's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. There really isn't much to say. It's really just an interesting way that I found to break it up. And I guess in addition, I would sort of like a re-emergence in the dream film, because it seemed like a pretty dead form since the 70s, really, ever since Tarkovsky, to my knowledge at least. If there's any recent dream films, or at least what sounds like a dream film, please make sure to let me know, because they're very magnifico. I love a nice good a dream film, so to speak, or a transcendental film, or whatever you like to call it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this was kind of give you a different outlook on how to view cinema and just a different way of interpreting its parameters. If you liked it, give it a like, comment, subscribe, and if you want to watch more videos like this one, stay tuned. New videos every week. Catch you guys later. Namaste, baby.